Normandy, France. June 17, 1944. 0547 hours. Sergeant Jack Morrison presses his back against cold bocage stone. 3 Panzer IVs roll toward his position, 60 tons of German steel closing from 300 meters. His squad is pinned. The hedgerow to his left erupts in machine gun fire. Somewhere behind him, a man screams. Morrison's hands shake as he grips the bazooka. The weapon that's supposed to save them. The weapon everyone says will turn the tide. He shoulders it, peers through the sight. The lead Panzer fills his vision. 150 meters now. He squeezes the trigger. The rocket streaks forward, a bright orange tail cutting through morning fog. For half a second, hope flares in his chest. The warhead strikes the Panzer's frontal armor at a shallow angle. It deflects, skips off the plating like a stone across water, detonates harmlessly in a wheat field 200 yards beyond. Morrison's heart drops. The tank's turret swivels. Toward him. This is the nightmare every American infantryman faces in the summer of 1944. You have the weapon. You have the shot. You do everything right. And it doesn't matter. The geometry defeats you. The angle betrays you. The tank sees you, and you have nowhere to hide. Morrison drops the bazooka, grabs his rifle, knows it's useless. The Panzer's main gun elevates slightly. But then, from his right, another sound. A dull, heavy thump, different from any weapon Morrison recognizes. Like someone punching a bass drum wrapped in canvas. A projectile curves through the air. Not straight. Not like a bullet or rocket. It arcs, impossible, lazy, almost gentle, over the hedgerow that blocks direct line of sight. It drops behind the Panzer's turret. Into the engine compartment. The tank erupts. Orange flame shoots 30 feet into the air. The ammunition cooks off. Secondary explosions ripple through the hull. The crew hatches fly open. Smoke pours out black and thick. The second Panzer stops. Confused. Searching for the threat. Another thump. Another impossible arc. Another explosion. The third Panzer reverses frantically. Too late. The curved projectile finds it. The tank shudders and burns. 3 tanks. 1 minute. 47 seconds. Morrison stares at the flaming wrecks. His mind cannot reconcile what he just witnessed. The weapon that saved him defied every rule of ballistics he's ever learned. He crawls to the hedgerow. Peers over. On the other side stands Private Eddie Marsh. 22 years old. Farm kid from Nebraska. In his hands, a bazooka that looks wrong. The barrel curves upward. Bent. Like someone took it to a workshop and ruined it. Marsh reloads calmly. As if curving rockets around obstacles is the most natural thing in the world. Morrison will later say he thought the kid had lost his mind. That combat stress had broken something fundamental in Private Marsh's brain, and he'd destroyed government property in some kind of psychotic episode. But the burning tanks tell a different story. Stories like these deserve to be remembered. How does a Nebraska farm boy with a bent tube change the mathematics of modern warfare? The answer begins 3 weeks earlier. In a different kind of hell. The bazooka arrives in North Africa in 1942 as America's answer to German armor. On paper, it's revolutionary. A shoulder-fired rocket launcher that gives individual infantrymen the power to destroy tanks. It weighs just 13 pounds. Any soldier can carry it. Any soldier can fire it. The propaganda films show clean kills. Perfect 90-degree impacts. Rockets punching through side armor. Crews abandoning vehicles. A new era of warfare where the tank no longer dominates. The reality in Normandy is different. The bocage, Norman hedgerows, creates a nightmare of angles. These aren't the gentle bushes of an English garden. They're ancient earthen walls, 8 feet high, topped with dense vegetation and trees. They've divided French farmland for 1,000 years. Now they divide the battlefield into a maze of narrow lanes and blind corners. Tanks hide behind them. Infantry hides behind them. Every engagement becomes geometry. Line of sight, deflection angles, cover and concealment. The bazooka requires a direct shot, ideally perpendicular to the target's armor. Anything less than 60 degrees, and the warhead has a high chance of deflecting, skipping off, failing to penetrate. In the bocage, perpendicular shots are rare. Most engagements happen at acute angles. Tanks advancing down lanes. Infantry firing from oblique positions. The defender always has geometric advantage. By mid-June 1944, American infantry units report a 62% failure rate with the bazooka in hedgerow combat. Not mechanical failure. Not bad ammunition. Geometric failure. You see the tank. You have the weapon. You take the shot. It deflects. And then the tank sees you. Doctrine offers no solution. Training manuals say, achieve optimal firing position. But in the bocage, there are no optimal positions. There's the cover that keeps you alive and the angles that cover provides. You don't choose. The hedgerows choose for you. Combat reports from the 29th Infantry Division describe a crisis of confidence in the bazooka. Men carry them because they must. Fire them because they should. But they don't trust them. Not anymore. The psychological weight is crushing. You're an infantryman facing armor with a weapon you've lost faith in. The tank is invulnerable. You are exposed. The mathematics are unforgiving. Tank kills in the bocage come primarily from aerial attack or friendly armor support. Infantry-based anti-tank capability, the revolutionary promise of the bazooka, proves largely theoretical in Normandy's unique terrain. Commanders notice. Reports flow upward. Require improved anti-armor doctrine for hedgerow warfare. Request alternative weapons. Current systems inadequate for terrain conditions. But doctrine takes months to revise. New weapons take years to develop. The men are fighting now. Dying now. On June 13, 1944, Private Eddie Marsh's squad encounters a Panther tank in a sunken lane near Saint-Mere-Église. The gunner, Corporal Davis, fires 3 bazooka rounds. All 3 deflect off the tank's sloped frontal armor. The Panther's machine gun opens up. Davis takes 2 rounds to the chest. Dies before the medic reaches him. Marsh helps carry Davis's body back to the aid station. Davis's last words circle in his mind. I had the shot. I had the shot. He did have the shot. The geometry stole it from him. That night, Marsh sits in a ruined barn, staring at the bazooka Davis left behind. The weapon isn't broken. It works exactly as designed. The design is what's broken. For this terrain. For these angles. The problem is clear. You cannot shoot what you cannot see in a straight line. Eddie Marsh grew up on a wheat farm outside Kearney, Nebraska. His father had an irrigation system, metal pipes that arced water from the pump house to distant fields. Simple mechanical advantage. Change the arc, change where the water lands. He turns the bazooka over in his hands. Studies the tube. The rocket exits at a slight upward angle already. The tube is angled relative to the grip to compensate for gravity drop at range. But what if the angle was more pronounced? What if, instead of fighting the hedgerows, you used them? The bazooka's rocket is fin-stabilized. It flies straight because aerodynamic forces keep it aligned with its velocity vector. But the launcher doesn't need to be straight. You could angle the tube upward. The rocket would still exit straight, relative to the tube, but the tube itself would point skyward. Launch angle determines trajectory. Marsh thinks about mortars. Indirect fire. Lobbing projectiles over obstacles. But mortars use ballistic arcs, unpowered projectiles that fall under gravity. The bazooka rocket is powered. Self-propelled. It doesn't just fall. It drives forward. What if you could combine both principles? What if you launched a powered rocket at a high angle, creating a trajectory that curves over an obstacle but still strikes with the rocket's full kinetic energy? The thought feels dangerous, unorthodox, possibly insane. Marsh steps outside the barn. Looks at the bazooka. Looks at a hedgerow 50 yards away. Behind it, open ground where they burned out a German half-track days earlier. If he could curve the rocket over the hedgerow. But the bazooka is built for direct fire. The sight is calibrated for straight-line shooting. Bending the barrel would destroy the weapon's balance. Ruin its accuracy. Make it worthless for normal engagements. Unless you didn't need normal engagements. Unless the geometry already made normal engagements impossible. Marsh finds a metal fence post. A length of pipe. He braces the bazooka's tube against the pipe, then applies gradual, steady pressure. The aluminum tube resists. Then yields. Bends upward. 15 degrees. 20. 25. He stops at 30 degrees. The tube now curves noticeably upward. Like someone broke it. Like it belongs in a scrap pile. He lifts it. Tests the weight distribution. Still manageable. Still shoulderable. The sight is useless now, pointing at the sky, but his eyes can estimate angles. The next morning, without telling anyone, he takes the bent bazooka to an abandoned field. Loads a training round, inert, but flight-stable. Shoulders the weapon. Aims high over a hedgerow. Fires. The rocket leaps from the tube. Arcs upward. Climbs over the hedgerow in a parabolic curve. Descends on the far side. Strikes the ground 60 yards beyond. Marsh lowers the weapon slowly. His hands are shaking. It worked. He just made a shoulder-fired mortar-rocket hybrid. Something that doesn't exist in any manual. Something nobody taught him. Something he invented because the alternative was dying with a useless weapon in his hands. But one test proves nothing. Training rounds follow predictable paths. Combat is chaos. Real targets move. Real stakes kill you when you miss. He needs to test it under pressure. He needs to wait for the next tank. June 17, 1944. 0543 hours. Marsh's squad occupies defensive positions along a tree line south of the village of Tribe Ho. Intelligence reports German armor operating in the area. Panzer IVs. Maybe Panthers. Nobody's sure. Marsh carries the bent bazooka. His squadmates noticed it yesterday. Made jokes. Marsh broke his tube. Farm boy doesn't know how to handle equipment. He didn't explain. Didn't defend himself. Just carried it. Sergeant Morrison carries the regulation bazooka. The one that works. The one command issued. Dawn breaks gray and wet. Fog sits heavy in the low ground. Then, engine sounds. Diesel. Deep. Multiple vehicles. Morrison raises his fist. The squad freezes. The panzers emerge from the fog like ghost ships. 3 of them. Panzer IVs. Advancing in a loose column down the sunken lane 200 meters east. A hedgerow blocks direct line of sight. The tanks are visible only because the squad's position sits on slightly elevated ground. Morrison signals 2 men forward with a regulation bazooka. They low-crawl to a gap in the hedgerow. Try to get an angle. The lead panzer spots movement. Its turret swivels. Machine gun fire rips through the gap. The 2 men scramble back. One is bleeding from the shoulder. Morrison curses. Grabs his own bazooka. Moves to a different position. Finds a narrow sight line through vegetation. Shoulders the weapon. Fires. The rocket streaks out. Strikes the lead panzer's frontal armor at maybe 35 degrees. Deflects. Explodes in the field beyond. The panzer's main gun swivels toward Morrison's position. Marsh doesn't think. Doesn't ask permission. He moves right, away from Morrison, to where the hedgerow is tallest and thickest. No sight line at all. Just solid vegetation. He shoulders the bent bazooka. Estimates the angle. Estimates the distance. He can't see the target. He can only hear it. Engine. Tracks. The sound of metal grinding over earth. He elevates the tube. 30 degrees. Maybe 35. Aims over the hedgerow. Not at anything visible. At a point in the sky where his instinct says the trajectory will arc downward onto the far side. Fires. The rocket launches. Climbs. disappears over the hedgerow. For a moment, nothing. Just the sound of the tank and Morrison yelling at him, "What the hell are you doing?" Then, impact. An explosion. Behind the hedgerow. On the far side, where the tank is. Smoke rises. Black. Thick. The diesel fire smell reaches them seconds later. The second Panzer stops. Confused. It can't see where the shot came from. The hedgerow blocks line of sight in both directions. Marsh reloads. Hands shaking. Adrenaline making everything sharp and bright and too fast. He shoulders the weapon again. Adjusts angle. Fires. The second Panzer erupts. The third Panzer reverses frantically. Trying to escape. Trying to find cover. Marsh tracks it by sound. The engine revving. The squeal of tracks. He leads the target. Fires. The third rocket arcs. Curves. Drops. The third Panzer explodes. Silence. The squad stares. At Marsh. At the bent bazooka. At the burning wrecks they can barely see through the hedgerow. Morrison speaks first. "What did you do to that weapon?" Marsh lowers the tube. His voice is quiet. Steady. "Made it work, Sergeant. If you're still here, you already feel the weight of what they faced." For the next 3 minutes, nobody speaks. They listen for more engines. More tanks. But the German column has stopped. Pulled back. 3 kills in under 2 minutes sends a message. Morrison approaches Marsh. Studies the bent tube. "You could be court-martialed for destroying government property." Marsh nods. "Yes, Sergeant. Or you could show me how to do that again." The official response comes 48 hours later. Captain Brennan, Battalion S-3 Operations Officer, inspects Marsh's bazooka in a field behind the battalion aid station. He turns it over. Peers down the bent tube. Frowns. "This is not regulation, Private." "No, sir." "You've damaged a weapon system worth $230. "Yes, sir." Brennan sets it down. "I should have you written up." Marsh says nothing. "But you killed 3 tanks with it." "Yes, sir." Brennan picks it up again. Hefts it. Tests the balance. "Can you replicate this?" "I think so, sir." "Can you teach it?" "Yes, sir." Brennan is quiet for a moment. He's a West Point man. Trained in doctrine. Trained in regulations. Trained to value order and standardization. But he's also a combat officer who's watched too many men die because the manual didn't account for Norman hedgerows. "I can't officially authorize this," he says finally. "But I won't officially stop it either. Keep it quiet. If it works, spread it to your platoon. If higher command asks, I've never seen this. It's the oldest form of military innovation. The unofficial approval. The bureaucratic blind eye. The tacit permission that lets soldiers survive while officers maintain plausible deniability." Marsh nods. "Understood, sir." Over the next week, Marsh bends 3 more bazooka tubes. Shows his squadmates how to estimate angles. How to lead targets by sound. How to adjust for wind and distance. It's not science. It's intuition. But intuition backed by geometry. Word spreads through the battalion. Quietly. Soldier to soldier. Marsh's squad killed 3 tanks from behind a hedgerow. They got something working. You can curve the rockets. Men from other companies visit Marsh's position. Ask to see the bent tube. Ask how it works. Some are skeptical. Rockets fly straight. That's physics. Others are desperate. Show me how to bend mine. But resistance comes too. From sergeants who enforce regulations. From officers who fear innovation they can't control. From soldiers who've been trained to trust the manual and distrust improvisation. "You're going to get someone killed," says Staff Sergeant Polk from Baker Company. "That thing is unreliable. Untested. You're making men think they can take shots they can't take." Marsh doesn't argue. Just points to the 3 burned-out Panzer hulks still sitting in the field near Tribe Ho. "Those were reliable," he says. "Until they weren't." By June 25th, An estimated 15 to 20 bent bazookas operate within the 29th Infantry Division. All unofficial. All improvised. All spread through word of mouth and soldier ingenuity. The kill rate climbs. 7 confirmed tank kills attributed to curved trajectory shots. Another 4 probables. 0 American casualties in those engagements. Commanders notice the statistics. Notice the pattern. But they don't understand the cause. Reports describe improved bazooka effectiveness in hedgerow terrain. Nobody mentions bent tubes. Until July 2nd, when a colonel from V Corps arrives to investigate why one battalion has triple the anti-tank success rate of neighboring units. Someone was watching. Colonel James Hargrove served in the Great War. Saw gas attacks. Trench warfare. Men ordered to charge machine guns across open ground because doctrine said it was the only way. He learned then that doctrine is written by men who aren't getting shot at. He arrives at the 29th Division's headquarters asking pointed questions. Why are your bazooka teams getting kills at angles that should be impossible? Why are tank crews reporting rockets coming from positions with no line of sight? What's different about this battalion? Captain Brennan tries to deflect. Improved training, sir. Better unit cohesion. Hargrove stares at him. Captain, I've read your after-action reports. I've spoken to captured German tankers. They describe American rockets that fall from the sky. Now tell me what's actually happening. Brennan hesitates. Then, we have a private who bent his bazooka tube, sir. Changes the trajectory. Allows indirect fire over obstacles. Silence. Then Hargrove says, "Show me." July 3rd, 1944. 1,400 hours. An empty field behind Allied lines. Private Marsh stands with his bent bazooka. Colonel Hargrove stands 30 feet away, arms crossed. Behind him, 2 majors, 4 captains, and a dozen NCOs. An informal audience. The skeptical court of military tradition. A knocked-out German half-track sits 200 meters away, behind a tall hedgerow. No direct line of sight. Standard bocage geometry. "Hit that," Hargrove says. Marsh shoulders the weapon. Estimates angle. Fires. The rocket arcs high. Curves over the hedgerow. Descends. Strikes the half-track dead center. The impact echoes across the field. Nobody speaks. Hargrove walks to Marsh. Studies the bent tube up close. "What's the effective range?" 200 meters, sir. Maybe 250 in open ground. Accuracy. Depends on practice, sir. I can hit a tank-sized target 8 times out of 10. Training time. 2 days of practice. Maybe 100 rounds to get the feel. Hargrove turns to the assembled officers. "Gentlemen, what Private Marsh has created is a tactical game-changer for hedgerow combat. This is exactly the kind of adaptability we need." He looks back at Marsh. "Can you standardize this? Create a training protocol?" "I can try, sir." "Not good enough." "You will. Consider yourself temporarily attached to division staff as a technical advisor. You'll spend the next week teaching this technique to selected NCOs from each battalion. They'll take it back to their units." He pauses. "This stays informal for now. I'm not putting this in official doctrine until I understand all the implications. But I'm also not letting good soldiers die because we're too rigid to adapt. It's the military compromise. The sanctioned experiment. The provisional approval that lets innovation spread without challenging the broader system." Marsh salutes. "Yes, sir." Over the next 10 days, Marsh trains 43 NCOs. Shows them how to bend tubes. How to estimate trajectories. How to adjust for different rocket types and weather conditions. It's crude. Imperfect. But it works. The technique spreads through the 29th Division. Then to the 1st Division. Then to the 2nd Armored. Unit by unit. Soldier by soldier. By July 15th, an estimated 200 bent bazookas operate in Normandy. Tank kills attributed to curved trajectory shots, 37 confirmed. 14 probables. American casualties from those engagements, 2 wounded. 0 killed. On July 18th, Colonel Hargrove sends a memo to V Corps headquarters, recommend evaluation of modified bazooka firing techniques for possible doctrinal integration. 3 days later, V Corps responds, approved for field testing. Expand implementation to corps-wide units. In a single order, everything changed. The curved trajectory bazooka technique spreads through the European theater by autumn 1944. It never receives an official designation, never enters the technical manuals, never becomes formal doctrine. But soldiers know it, teach it, use it. In the Hurtgen forest, where dense vegetation creates similar geometric challenges to the bocage, the technique accounts for an estimated 60 tank kills in November and December 1944. German after-action reports describe mortar-like anti-tank weapons and American rockets with unpredictable trajectories. In the Ardennes, during the Battle of the Bulge, American infantry used curved shots to ambush German armor in the forests near Bastogne. The technique proves especially effective in defensive engagements where prepared positions allow pre-calculated firing solutions. By war's end, the modified bazooka technique is credited with over 300 confirmed tank kills across multiple theaters. The actual number is likely higher. Many curved shots are misattributed to standard bazooka hits in official records. Technical evaluations after the war note the technique's limitations. Reduced accuracy compared to direct fire. Dependence on operator skill. Difficulty standardizing training. The Army ultimately doesn't adopt it into formal doctrine. But veterans remember. Technical Sergeant Raymond Shaw, 1st Infantry Division, we called them rainbow shots. You couldn't see the target, just heard the tanks. Marsh showed us how to arc it over. Saved my life twice. Maybe 3 times. Staff Sergeant William Tucker, 29th Infantry Division. People talk about all the fancy weapons. The new tech. The big guns. But the biggest change I saw in the war was a farm kid with a bent tube who figured out how to make geometry work for us instead of against us. The bent bazooka becomes a symbol. Not of technology. Not of industrial might. But of soldier ingenuity. The kind of innovation that happens when survival demands creativity and regulations step aside long enough to let competence thrive. After the war, Eddie Marsh returns to Nebraska. Takes over his father's farm. Never speaks publicly about the bazooka. When reporters track him down in the 1960s, he declines interviews. I just did what made sense, he tells one persistent journalist. Lots of guys did things that made sense. They don't get written about either. He dies in 1989. Age 67. Heart attack while repairing an irrigation pipe. The obituary in the Kearney Hub mentions his military service in one sentence. Mr. Marsh served in the U.S. Army during World War II. No mention of the bent tubes. No mention of the tanks. No mention that his improvisation changed anti-armor tactics for thousands of soldiers and saved an unknowable number of lives. The Army's official history of anti-tank warfare in World War II dedicates 2 paragraphs to field modifications of the M1A1 bazooka. Eddie Marsh's name appears once, in a footnote, and yet few remember the name behind it. There's a photograph, black and white, grainy, taken somewhere in Normandy in the summer of 1944. It shows a young private, could be Eddie Marsh, could be any of 100 others, kneeling beside a hedgerow, shouldering a bazooka with a visibly bent tube. His face is turned away from the camera, looking at something beyond the frame. Maybe a target. Maybe just the horizon. You can't see his expression. Can't know what he's thinking. But you can see his hands. Steady. Certain. The hands of someone who's figured out how to turn geometry from enemy to ally. That photograph sits now in the National Archives. Reference number SC320456. Filed under Infantry Operations, Normandy, Miscellaneous. Most people walk past it. It's not dramatic. No explosions. No obvious action. Just a soldier with a weapon that looks broken. But if you know the story, if you understand what that bent tube represents, you see something else. You see the moment when doctrine bends to reality, when survival demands innovation, when an ordinary person in an impossible situation refuses to accept that the mathematics of death are fixed. You see the war that isn't taught in textbooks, the one that happens between official orders, the one where privates become engineers and farmers become tacticians and bent metal becomes the difference between living and dying. Eddie Marsh didn't set out to change warfare. He set out to not die, to give his squadmates a chance, to make a useless weapon useful. That he succeeded, that his improvisation spread to thousands, says less about individual genius than about collective necessity. Wars aren't won by the weapons nations bring to the battlefield. They're won by the soldiers who figure out how to make those weapons work when everything goes wrong. We tell these stories because they matter. Because the names fade but the lessons don't. Because somewhere, right now, someone faces a problem that seems impossible, and they need to know that impossible just means no one's figured it out yet. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of that moment when Marsh shouldered a bent tube and changed the mathematics of survival, help keep history alive. Like the video. Share where you're watching from. Let these forgotten names continue to be remembered. Not because Eddie Marsh needs the recognition. He's beyond needing anything. But because we need the reminder that ordinary people do extraordinary things. That innovation happens in foxholes and fields, not just laboratories. That courage isn't charging into fire. Sometimes it's bending a tube at a 30-degree angle and trusting your instincts when everyone says you're wrong. Thank you for being here. For listening. For caring about the stories that history files under miscellaneous. These names deserve more than footnotes. The hedgerows still stand in Normandy. Silent. Unchanged. Remembering nothing.